Let's go now to our panel of politicians, the Trade Minister Craig Emerson and the Shadow Environment Minister Greg Hunt. Good morning to both of you. The primary vote down to 26%, Craig Emerson. That can't be good for morale. Do you think we'll see leadership speculation stirred up today ahead of the caucus meeting this morning?
There's really good discipline in our caucus because the caucus knows that we are doing what we should do as a government, and that is governing in the national interest, not worrying about weekly or daily or fortnightly polls. That's what governments are elected to do. It's not a day-by-day popularity contest. What we're doing through the carbon pricing mechanism, through our economic management and through the issue of asylum seekers, which I suspect we may get onto, is governing in the national interest. Sometimes that, in the short term, is not popular, but people understand that. They understand that governments need to make decisions that, notwithstanding their unpopularity in the short term, are good for the nation in the long term.
Greg Hunt, why isn't Tony Abbott doing better personally? 54% of people are dissatisfied with the way he's doing his job, considering the coalition's numbers. As we pointed out there, a huge majority in support of the coalition at the moment. Why isn't Tony Abbott personally doing a whole lot better?
Well, I think he's probably been the most effective opposition leader Australia has seen in decades.
But 54% of people dissatisfied.
I think that when you look at the situation for the government, these polls reflect massive public disillusion and massive public concern about incompetence. There is a sense that this is a government that is in chaos. Clearly the caucus is divided and itself disillusioned, but the public is saying we don't trust the government in terms of its competence, and we are disillusioned that they ruled out a carbon tax and also ruled out sending people to non-signatory countries to the International Refugee Convention. So there's no honesty on those fundamental issues.
But don't voters are disillusioned with both of the leaders? Isn't that what this poll is telling us?
Look, it's a tough profession, and what we're doing is holding the government to account and progressively building this sense of the alternative government. That is the next phase of what we're doing, and so I think there's enormous upside for the coalition, and we are very proud of our leader, and I think nobody has been a more effective opposition leader in the last 3, 4, 5 decades that Australia's had, and what that shows is an incredible self-discipline and capacity to run an effective government.
Well, Greg's right in a sense, and that is the opposition leader is very good at saying no. He's very good at opposing. That's all he does. And with this border protection measure, through opposing this legislation, Mr Abbott is handing over the control of Australia's borders to people smugglers.
Right, you're in government, Craig Emerson. It's your responsibility to get your policy up. Why do you keep slamming the opposition, slamming Tony Abbott, when this is your problem?
It needs. I think the statistics would bear this out. You need a majority of votes in the House of Representatives. You need a majority of votes in the Senate.
So why put pressure on Tony Abbott? You're in the power with the Greens are supporting you to be in government.
We seek a majority of votes in the House of Representatives and a majority of votes in the Senate. The Greens in the Senate have said that they will not support anything other than onshore processing, but Mr Abbott is terrified that the Malaysia arrangement will work. And what he says, his 3-word slogan is stop the boats, stop the boats. He doesn't want the boats to stop because he thinks he can profit politically by boats continuing to arrive, and that's why he's taking this position. There is no newfound compassion on the part of Mr Abbott. In fact, he confirmed last night that part of the policy is to tow boats back to Indonesia. Indonesia is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention.
Right. Okay, there are a few things to answer there. Let's first deal with that last point that Craig Emerson raised. We keep hearing about the hypocrisy of the coalition when it comes to the need under your changes to the Migration Act to have a country sign up to the UN Refugee Convention. Firstly, there's Indonesia, as Craig Emerson points out, that asylum seekers will end up with if you turn boats around. And secondly, when John Howard was Prime Minister, you didn't seem to mind that Nauru hadn't signed up to the convention then.
They broke it. We'll fix it. Under them, what we've seen is 12,000 arrivals, 240 boats, the end of offshore processing. We are offering Craig Emerson, Chris Bowen and the Prime Minister today a return to offshore processing. 148 countries. All they have to do is accept their own pre-election policy of states which are signatories to the UN Refugee Convention. I think the Prime Minister said on the 8th of July last year, I would rule out anywhere that is not a signatory to the convention. The same language she used when she ruled out a carbon tax. We offer a solution. 148 countries. Offshore processing can recommence on Nauru or Manus Island or at any time if the government wants to take it. The only people standing in the way of offshore processing are the Labor Party, and the only reason they're doing that is out of a breathtaking arrogance that they don't want to be seen to be accepting the option that's been effective, proven and workable.
But why aren't you being hypocritical? Back to my question, how do you answer those claims of hypocrisy when you consider that issue of turning boats around and ending up with asylum seekers back in Indonesia, which hasn't signed up to the convention?
Well, we make no apologies for the fact that there are three parts to our policy. First, there is a very tough upfront deterrent before people become part of the Australian orbit. Secondly, we have offshore processing, 148 countries available today. And thirdly, temporary protection visas. It's proven, it's effective, it worked, it stopped the boats. 240 boats, 12,000 people. That's what happened when they destroyed the solution.
We do just have a little bit of the Prime Minister, Ashleigh Gillon, speaking about this very issue on ABC Radio this morning. Have a listen to the latest from the Prime Minister.
I am not asking him, and I have never asked him, to endorse the government's plan for Malaysia. What I am asking him to do is to put this government and future governments in the same position that the Howard government was, with the same degree of options and powers. Now, why would Mr Abbott say no to that, other than hypocrisy, opportunism and a deep, deep fear that the Malaysia arrangement will work?
Craig Emerson, isn't Labor saying, in rejecting the Coalition's amendments to the Migration Act, that you would rather no offshore processing than go to Nauru?
No, what we're saying is that the government of the day should have the right to protect Australia's borders and protect asylum seekers who otherwise arrive by boats and lose their lives at sea or at Christmas Island, as we saw before Christmas. We are not being prescriptive to Mr Abbott, despite the advice that he has received that Nauru will not work, and he has received that advice from the experts in the field. He says he wants to go with Nauru. If he becomes the Prime Minister, he can go with Nauru under this legislation. What we're saying is that the advice that we've received, and it's very clear, unequivocal, and that is the Malaysia arrangement is the only one that would successfully break the people smugglers model, and Mr Abbott does not want the people smugglers model broken. He wants to hand over our border security to asylum to people who trade in people smuggling. That's what he wants to do, to hand that over to people smugglers. What he's saying is Mr Abbott is saying to people smugglers with the decision last night, start your engines and bring the boats, because why? He can profit politically from that. And Greg Hunt just twice refused to answer a very simple question, and that is that you put to him, if he says a country must be a signatory to the Refugee Convention, how could he reaffirm last night that he would turn boats back to Indonesia, which is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention? There is no logical answer to that. The only answer to this, from Mr Abbott's point of view, is a political one, and that is he wants to hand over Australia's borders to people smugglers, and he's saying to them, start your engines.
Politically, the left faction of the Labor Party is probably going to be very pleased if onshore processing does eventuate as a result of this stalemate. The Greens are also going to be very pleased. Politically, how do you think that will affect Labor's standing if you're seen to be going along with yet another Green policy?
We want to do the right thing by Australia, by border security and by asylum seekers who take these risky journeys. Mr Abbott wants to do neither. And so we are doing the right thing by the country, and we are showing plenty of flexibility. We are saying to Mr Abbott, even if you don't agree with this, we are not seeking your endorsement for the Malaysia arrangement, even though that is what the experts say we should implement. If he believes in in Nauru. He is, as Prime Minister, if he were elected, can exercise that option. There could not be a more reasonable proposition than this, but it's been rejected because Mr Abbott wants the boats to keep coming because he believes he will profit politically.
Honestly, Craig, that is
Absolutely
so silly
true.
as to be
Absolutely
ridiculous.
True.
What's the history here? We fixed it, they broke it, we'll fix it again, and we could fix it today. We could have offshore processing today. We're happy to bring the Parliament debate forward. We're happy to debate this in the Parliament today. We're happy to approve 148 countries for offshore processing, all against the standard that the Prime Minister set prior to the election. On the 8th of July last year, she said she rules out sending people to non-signatory countries. That is a pre-election promise. It's the same as the promise that she would rule out a carbon tax. So firstly, there is a pattern of deceit. But please, Craig and the ALP, don't blame us for standing up for the right standards and standing up for what the ALP pledged to the Australian people in the lead up to an election.
Okay, we do need to take a break. Craig Emerson, Greg Hunt, stay with us. After the break, we're going to get the latest on the Qantas strike today. Stay with us.
From a very young age, my